Okay, so I'm now really happy to be introducing our keynote speaker, Dr. Tiara Moore. Um, Dr. Tiara Moore is originally from South Carolina, but now lives on the West Coast and works with the Nature Conservancy. We were actually very impressed when we found Dr. Moore online. Uh, she is doing amazing work, and we saw that she has expertise in estuaries. And since we are speaking about land based sources of pollution, we thought that her experience would really fit in with the work that we are doing, actually trying to prevent land based sources of pollution. And I know most of you are thinking about plastics floating into the ocean, but there are other things floating into the ocean as well. So Dr. Tiara Moore is very active, not just in marine science, and she will tell you how she came to the marine science field, I'm sure. And if she doesn't tell it in this particular, please go to the booth. She'll be during the breaks. She will be available for you in the booths to especially talk to other people. Her booth is called Black in Marine Science because that is one of the things that she's advocating for, to have more people of color, people of African American descent in marine science. And so we really ask you to visit her booth, but most of all, we would like to invite Dr. Moore now um, to start her presentation. And I know I have to do some things for that to enable that. And there she is. So I'm going to now leave this to Dr. Tiara Moore to tell us more about her work, about how, although she is so far away from us at this moment, we are still connected. Thank you, Dr. Moore, and we are very keen on listening to your keynote speak. Thank you.
All righty. So let me know. We practiced this, so I think that I am good. The screen should be sharing. I'm looking at my phone because I think I'm supposed to get a message to let me know that everything is okay. But I'm going to keep going, assuming that it is. But thank you so much for allowing me to be here today to talk with you all. So yeah, the name of my talk is One Ocean, Big Pollution, and You. I'm Dr. Tiara Moore, and I use she, her pronouns. All right, I haven't gotten any messages, so I'm going to keep going. I'm assuming everything is good. Okay. So I will start my talk by saying, oh, there's she, her. There it is. Okay. Saying Happy World Ocean Day. This is a very exciting day for us, but it's also Pride Month, so happy Pride Month. And then I found out today that it's also Sea Turtle Week, so happy Sea Turtle Week. And so today I'm going to be talking about how the ocean connects us. We're all connected by water, we're all connected by the ocean, but unfortunately and ultimately, pollution impacts us. Pollution impacts the ocean, it impacts us daily, it impacts the environment. And so we have to figure out a way to save us, to save the ocean, to save the planet, to stop all of these impacts that we've been having as humans to really make a difference in the world. So I like to start all of my talks with doing my favorite thing, and that's talking about myself. And so I know there are students here and there's folks here. So just to give you a better understanding of my perspective, my journey as a marine scientist, as a Black woman, and yeah, who I am. So I'll start with that. So please indulge me. So here is the great states, United States of America. And so I am originally from Greenwood, South Carolina. So that country accent, they call that. So you'll see that arrow there. So you'll see it's inland. And so, yeah, I was raised by my grandmother there in Greenwood, South Carolina. And so when I decided to go to undergrad, I came from a large family and I was always the babysitter. So I decided that I wanted to go to Winthrop University. So just up a little bit, still inland, but up, and go to be a pediatrician. I went there to be pre-med. And so I actually realized while I was there that I didn't really like kids like that. So it wasn't going to work out. So I had to figure out something else for me to do. And so I started taking these other just biology classes because I wanted to stay in biology. And there was this class called tropical ecology. And I'll be honest, I signed up for it because they were going to Costa Rica for spring break. So I thought, oh, wow, this could be a fun trip. Let me go. But then when I got there, we were on a boat. We were collecting water samples. We were doing these experiments. There were senior scientists there. I was like, wow, are y'all being paid for this? Is this a job? And that's when I found out about the whole world of marine science. So I decided that that's what I wanted to do with my life. And so I came back from that experience, decided that I wanted to go to graduate school. I wrote application, wrote in my personal statement. So students, if you're listening to me, they do read your personal statements. But I wrote, hi, I've taken this one marine science class, but I'm super excited. Please accept me. And they did. And so I moved to the water to Hampton, Virginia. And so Hampton is where I would say I actually became a marine scientist. And so Hampton was really interesting because I got a different experience. So Winthrop University was what you call a PWI, or a predominantly white institution, whereas Hampton University is HBCU, or historically Black college university. So there was a cultural difference, as well as me really diving into becoming a marine scientist. And so there I focused on the water quality of the Chesapeake Bay. And because we know the Chesapeake Bay is highly impacted by nutrient pollution due to the large watershed. So after that, I was so hyped up as a master of science. So I decided that I wanted to continue on with my education. So I moved all the way across the country now, back to our map, to go to California to get my PhD at UCLA, or the University of California, Los Angeles. And that's when my research really started to focus on nutrient pollution in the form of these large macroalgal blooms that we have down in Southern California. So once I completed my PhD, it was time for me to go and do another position, because that's what we do when we're in school. We continue to do all these other things until we get our real job. And so now I have moved all the way up the coast, up here to Seattle, Washington. And so I'm doing a postdoc at the University of Washington in the Nature Conservancy. And so this allows me to utilize this really interesting tool that I'm going to talk about later to understand biodiversity monitoring and assessments. So that is really me, my background. So you know, who is this person that's talking to me? And so throughout my career, I really thought about human impacts, but definitely the ocean. So if you'll just take a moment with me to just enjoy. So we're all here to celebrate today. This beautiful, vast, beautiful, right? It's just so calming. We love the ocean. And so when we think about maybe everything that you've been taught about the ocean, there are these 5 different oceans: Pacific Ocean, Atlantic Ocean, Arctic Ocean, Indian Ocean, Southern Ocean. And there I put a little label where I am versus where you are. And I'm actually on the East Coast right now in Georgia. But we have all of this water around and all of these different oceans. But when you really look at this map and you think about how water works, we really see that the key factor here is the ocean. So if we take all these names, take all of these other things that identify them, we all see that we have this one ocean. No matter the name, we're all connected by this body of water that surrounds these land masses. And it's just really one ocean. And so when we look at the numbers, we know that the Earth is 71% ocean. So all around us is water. On top of that, there are 2.6 billion people who live in coastal communities. So areas that are surrounded by the ocean or impacted by the ocean, or estuaries or river system, all these water communities, people live around them. And that is about 40% of the global population. So that is a whole lot of people who are living around the ocean that are also going to be impacted by the ocean, but are also impacting the ocean. So we know that humans are causing major environmental concerns. There has been a large increase in population due to the years. And so we're also causing these concerns in the environment, utilizing resources, because we're doing damaging impacts like destruction of habitat. We know there's more people, so we have more housing needs. There's the need for more Targets, more Walmarts, more grocery stores, things like that. So we come in, we destroy entire ecosystems, clear-cutting forests, destroying them and displacing habitat and organisms. Things like overharvesting, an example, overfishing here. So we go out, we take these big trawls and these big things, and we take entire ecosystems from the water. And so I'm not saying that everyone needs to go out and be vegan or anything like that, but we need to figure out ways to do these sustainably and responsibly, because we're taking these large amounts out of the ocean. What are we doing to that ecosystem? Because ultimately, this would lead to a loss of biodiversity. So as you can imagine, if you're removing organisms from the ecosystem, or if you're destroying their habitat, they're no longer going to have anywhere to go. And so that organism is going to start to decrease, and their function in that ecosystem is going to be lost. Other human impacts include lots of nutrient enrichment. So again, I mentioned the population. We have more humans, we have more people that we need to feed. So we have increased agricultural practices. There are so many people to feed, so much food that we need, that we have these huge crops, and they are sprayed with so much fertilizers. All of those fertilizers are put on those crops in order to enhance, so we can, get the food that we need. But as soon as the rain or water event happen, those excess nutrients from those agricultural practices are washed into our water systems and our waterways. And so this can lead to large amounts of excess nutrient-enriched water into our rivers, into our streams, and ultimately into our oceans. And nutrient enrichment can impact the water in multiple ways. My favorite, though, what I studied during my PhD, is this concept of eutrophication, or this build-up of this organic matter that's due because of these excess nutrients. So we have all these nutrients, then we see the outcome being a large algal bloom. And here we have a macroalgal bloom. So you'll see I'm sitting in Some people ask me, oh, is that grass? Like, no, this is macroalgae, or type of seaweed that is there, that has grown, that has come and taken over this particular estuary because of the excess nutrients. And so we see these types of phenomena worldwide. It can be in the form of these macroalgal blooms or in like phytoplankton blooms. Another huge impact that we see in our waters is plastic pollution. Everybody talks about, plastic and single-use plastics and all of that. And we know that there is a large amount of plastic pollution in the water, in our oceans now, due to these single-use plastics and things like that. And so we know that because of these input of these plastics into our ocean, we see things like microplastics now being formed. And then we also know that our wildlife are being disturbed. So I did mention it was Sea Turtle Week, so I had to put a sea turtle up. But when we're looking at, scientists looking at the gut contents of sea turtles and other marine mammals and organisms, they're finding more plastic than ever before. And this is directly due to human input impacts. A big one that people are quite familiar with, are definitely becoming familiar with, is climate change. Climate change is something that is, it's like hard to think about it as a scientist, because we've been seeing the things, the impacts that have been going on, but some people don't even think that these things are occurring. But climate change occurs due to the excess amounts of greenhouse gases that are in the atmosphere. And greenhouse gases are things like carbon dioxide or methane that come from manufacturing and production and transport. Oh yeah, so I have this. So when we look at the global sources of greenhouse gases, we have industry, transportation, agricultural, food, forestry, heat production. All of these things, again, direct human impacts, are causing these excess gases to get into our atmosphere. This atmosphere absorbs these gases and they trap heat. And that's where we see the changes in temperature. But we also see when there is an excess amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, it's absorbed by the surface ocean. And so we see the phenomena known as ocean acidification. So again, we have this excess carbon dioxide that's in the atmosphere, absorbed by the ocean, the surface ocean. There's a chemical reaction, and we see a decline, a decrease in pH, or the water becomes more acidic. So what you're looking at here is an intact shell. So here's a shell made out of calcium carbonate. Here at the end, it has been subjected to pH levels expected by 2100. And so you'll see it went from an intact shell to basically almost dissolved. And so this is what happens due, again, to these direct human impacts. This is the equivalent of someone coming into your home and starting to tear down the walls around you, and there's nothing you can do about it. That's what's happening to these marine organisms. Another ocean impact, and specifically for your region, is gold mining. This is such an important topic that we don't talk a lot about, but due to the processes of gold mining, we see an increase of mercury production or mercury release into our waterways. And this is important. You might say, oh, well, we're getting gold, or we're getting the gold from it. Well, who cares about the mercury that's released? But once something goes into the water that's not necessarily supposed to be there, there is going to be an impact. And the impact we see with this is called bioaccumulation. So if you can imagine, we have for coal mining, we're having all that excess mercury that's getting into the water. That mercury is then being absorbed or being put into the fish and the organisms that are living in this water. So now we have mercury-filled water, and so now these fish are swimming in this mercury-filled water, and now they're filled with this mercury. And so we can see this could be really important if I go back to this first photo for human consumption. So you can imagine if we think about overharvesting and us eating fish, if this straw here is filled with fish that are filled with mercury from bioaccumulation due to gold mining, then that's going to directly impact humans who are eating that fish. So all of this is really important in understanding how these things are connected, because you can say, oh, well, this is happening over here, but no, this one thing is impacting the other thing. So I just told you a whole lot of different impacts on the ocean, on the environment. And so what can we do? You know, I don't want to make this be all sad and drum. As a scientist, I have to be realistic about what things that we can actually do. But I think the first is understanding what is actually going on. And I know I went over there, hopefully I didn't go too quickly, but I just wanted to highlight some of the key things that are impacting the one ocean globally and specifically for your region. And so when I think about how we can save the ocean, what can we do to truly impact the planet, I think of these things: research, education, and restoration. And so I start with research because I'm a scientist and research is what I do. And so to truly understand the impacts of the ocean and the human impacts on the ocean and all of the things that I mentioned prior, we have to really understand the numbers. And for me, in the science that I do, when I look at all those impacts before, I really see that it leads to this loss of biodiversity, all of those nutrient pollution, ocean acidification, mining, all of that impacts ultimately biodiversity of the organisms in the ocean. And so the first thing is to understand the numbers. So when we look at our population, human population, and then land use conversion. So let's just pick out the year 2000. There was 6.1 billion humans. Land area had been converted was about 39.3. At that point, we had lost 13.6% of ecosystem biodiversity just off of land use. The projected numbers for 2100 will be up to 17% loss of species biodiversity. And so this is just for a land use conversion. So if we put on top of that the ocean acidification, the climate change, the nutrient pollution, all of that, we're really talking large scale impacts. And so generally, how we would try to measure or try to understand this type of thing is the biodiversity monitoring. And so you have scientists that go out who would literally, you know, take this guy here has his binoculars, he's probably birding or looking for, probably birding, looking for different birds, trying to get a count or an assessment of the organisms in the ecosystem. You may be familiar with fish surveys. So in the ocean, we would go get on scuba diving and stand out there for, an hour or so and actually count the fish, lay out a transect and count the fish. And so when we're thinking about how we want to truly track and understand biodiversity, new methods are being established. And so I'm excited to share about the method that I actually use in my research. And so again, we have the typical biodiversity monitoring is really going out and seeing what's there. But what if there was a way where we could understand what was there without actually seeing it? And so that's my specialty, environmental DNA. So what is environmental DNA? So I like to explain this as an example of a crime show, because everyone loves crime shows. And so, there will be a criminal who does something, they'll be leaving out and they tap their finger on the window. And then the detectives come in and they get the fingerprint and they say, oh, we know who this person is, after they run it through a database. And that's because as we're moving through the environment, we're shedding genetic information, genetic material. And that's for everything. So as organisms, species move through their environment, they're leaving behind feces, skin, fur, pollen, leaves, mucus. All of that can be collected in an environmental sample, and then we can get an understanding of what's there. So you'll see if I blow up this GIF that's been there, you'll see this fish here is swimming through the water. But as it's swimming through that water, it's leaving behind its DNA. And so a scientist like myself could collect that sample and tell you that organism is there. So here's just an example of what I do in my research. So here's at the sample stage. So for me, I would go out. So here I am working in the estuary, trying to get an understanding of this biodiversity in the ecosystem. So I scooped up some soil and some sediment samples and some water with my super fancy collection tools, which is a Slurpee straw. But I actually use this Slurpee straw just because it's sterile. So I can use a different Slurpee straw in between each sample, just open it up, scoop it, and make sure that the sample does not get contaminated. So you have to think quick and dirty when you're a field ecologist. But next, after we collect the sample, then we move to this step, which is DNA extraction. So as I mentioned, as you're moving around, your DNA is just flipping around, just slipping off of you. So we collect that whole sample, then we extract the DNA. And what that looks like is we go from that dirt sample that you saw me collect to an actual clear liquid sample. So now all of the clear liquid in these little vials here is the DNA that was in the ecosystem from the species that were there. After that, we can then tag the DNA with primers through a process called DNA metabarcoding, or PCR, polymerase chain reaction. And what this does is it takes that clear liquid and it tags it with a barcode. And this barcode will identify species in species that are there. So if you use like a primer for bacteria, it would identify all the bacteria there. If you used a primer for birds, it would identify birds. And so after you do this, you're all working in the lab. After you tag your DNA, you then have to run it on a gel, doing a process called gel electrophoresis. And this will identify, basically it will highlight using a UV light if that primer is in your sample. And so I actually have a video of this, of me doing some lab work, just me waiting for the results to see if I had the primers in my samples. So I want to play this for you now, just so you get an idea of being a scientist in the lab, but also what we're doing in the lab. And it's not boring as people try to make the lab to be. So this is me in the lab. And I edited this myself, so bear with me and enjoy. Hopefully you can hear it. I'm Dr. Tiara Moore, and welcome to the lab. So today in the lab, we're going to be doing a process called gel electrophoresis. So I'll show you a sneak peek. We've loaded our gel, it started to run, and we have to keep it covered because the stain that we use is light sensitive. But come here, look what we got. So you'll see that the gel, you'll see the DNA fragments, they are actually starting to run. So hopefully when we put this under UV light, we'll actually see those primers that we put onto our DNA fragments. Yay! All right, our gel is ready to run. So I just turn off the gel rig, unplug it from the machine. Oh my goodness, come look at this gel. So here are all the samples that we just ran, and we see that the DNA fragment moved. Something happened. So hopefully we will see our amplification. So I just take this whole rig, take it over to our imaging machine, which uses this UV light to get us a photo of our DNA. So I'm going to move it around a little because we don't want any air bubbles. Close the imager. There's a little air bubble. Make sure that it's on the screen, on my computer screen. Close the imager so you have one good one off because we don't want to have any of that nasty styrofoam on our imaging machine. And then run protocol. All right, guys, this is the moment of truth. I could have just been here for about 3 hours doing nothing. Wouldn't that be so sick? Here we go. Bam! Hey! So this says PCR worked, everyone. Okay, thanks. Thanks for listening. But no, I show that video again for a couple of reasons, just so you can see the process of what it looks like just to be waiting for to see if your tags do show up, because it is a fun process. But also, again, to show that the lab is not a scary place. You can go in the lab, you can do research, you can ask real questions and have a good time. So anyway, back to this. So you saw that the primers, the tags that we added to our samples actually lit up. So that meant something was there. We were going to be able to identify some species. So after we do that process, we then move to the species identification. So we go from literally a sample of soil or water to now I can tell you what's there, this biodiversity census. So here you're looking at a graph of relative abundance of organisms. And so just looking at colors, you can see there are all different types of organisms in my sample. And so me not having a background in taxonomy and also not even being able to see these species, I can now tell you that they were in my ecosystem. So we can track biodiversity quite easily and get a better understanding of how things are changing in the ecosystem with the one, without being a taxonomist, without having that background in the species recognition, but also not having to spend hours out in the field doing surveys or looking for things or doing counts. And so this is a really interesting tool as we think about moving into the future of climate change mitigation and really trying to understand the impacts of the ocean. Because like I mentioned, we can see things happening by loss of biodiversity. So if we have an understanding of biodiversity in each of our ecosystems, we can know in real time what is going on. So that's research. That's my research. There is a lot of other research that is going on. There's a lot of other things that we can be talking about as far as mitigating a lot of the human impacts that I mentioned. But that's just the tool that I'm very excited to share with you all and hope to see more people utilizing it in the field. But next will be education. And so I think a lot about biodiversity in the ecosystem, but I'm also a Black woman in marine science. And so while I think about biodiversity, I also think a lot about diversity. And so here you're looking at two different articles that were written in 2018. And so the first is no progress on diversity in 40 years. And this is talking about basically people who are getting doctorates in atmospheric and ocean sciences are not diverse. And there has been no improvement in the past 4 decades. On the other side, you'll see the only Black person in the room, and that was written by me. And I knew nothing about this other article that was written, but what I did know is how it felt. And so in the only Black person in the room, I wrote about when I introduced myself as a marine scientist, people would say, oh, you can swim? Or when I would go on these huge scuba diving trips with my science colleagues, people would ask me if I was there to carry the tanks. And so there was this huge disconnect between me trying to be a marine scientist and who the world saw me as and saw me and what we were supposed to be doing. And I now know it was because of there hadn't been any progress on diversity in 40 years, something I didn't know, but now was acutely aware of in the experiences that I was going through. And so me, as someone who I would say is an advocate trying to understand why and what we're doing, we had a whole week last year and we created the organization Black in Marine Science that Monique talked about a little bit. And I will be at the booth later talking about it. But Black in Marine Science Week last year in 2020 was a whole week aimed to highlight Black people in marine science. So the current Black marine scientists, and then also to inspire the next generation of scientists. And we really talked about all the things that we just, that goes on in the field, but then also our research and how we really want to save the ocean. And while we were doing this week of amplification, we're trying to figure out why is there this lack of diversity? What is going on? And then the National Science Foundation put out this table, and I couldn't, and maybe this points to a bigger thing because I couldn't find larger international data. But this graph shows that out of 416 people who received doctorates in ocean and marine science, only 4 of them were Black or African American. And like I mentioned, I look for larger research, but I know that it's even smaller amounts when we look at the international scale of who is actually getting degrees in ocean and marine science. And so we really want to change that. And so Black in Marine Science created a YouTube series called BIMS Bites. And the whole goal of BIMS Bites is to communicate different topics of marine science, but also change the face of who people see as scientists. And so we have this little promo, and I will be playing these videos at the BIMS booth, so definitely come by and check it out. But here's just the promo for BIMS Bites.
Welcome to BIMS TV. I'm Dr. Camille Gaines. I'm Leslie Townsell.
I am Alex Troutman.
I'm Dr. Jeanette Davis.
I'm Dr. Tiara Moore.
I'm Simone Barkley. And this is BIMS Bites. BIMS Bites is a weekly series featuring Black marine scientists presenting a small bite of marine science.
I'm biting into what is marine science.
I'll be biting into the water cycle.
I'll be biting into biodiversity.
I'll be biting into plastic pollution.
I'll be biting into climate change.
I will be biting into tidal marshes.
Make sure you tune in Fridays at 10 a.m. PST, 1 p.m. Eastern. We'll see you there. So again, if you want any more information on Black and Marine Science, definitely contact us, look us up on any of these methods. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Because again, we want to show the world that, and kids and youth, everyone, that you can be a marine scientist. And not only can you be, we should be, because the earth is 70% ocean. And so we need everyone. We need everyone. Because again, when we look at the numbers, we know, I mentioned this before, that there's 2.6 billion people living in these coastal communities, but they're actually more comprised of Black and brown people. So Black and brown people are 20% more likely to live on the coast than inland. So we need people who look like the communities that are impacted. And that is the goal for Black and Marine Science. So again, if you have any more information, please stop by the booth. And then lastly, restoration. And I think when we have research and education, we can ultimately lead to restoration. And this can look like a number of different things. And one thing that you can actually do is community action. We think a lot about, here's the example of me hosting a beach cleanup that I went to a conference and just went out and said, hey, let's all go together and clean up the beach for an hour. And we collected all these bags of trash. But there's also things like governmental policies and reform that we can be supporting to be able to make a difference and see change in our communities. So, what can you do? I would say listen to scientists. And scientists can be a lot of different people. I think it was very interesting since we're all, I guess we all know about this with the pandemic and everything that was going on. It was like people didn't really believe that these things existed. They didn't want to listen to scientists. They're not believing the research that is being done. And so I think that we can listen to scientists when we have more scientists who look like you, who you can believe, who know how to communicate science to who is being impacted. So I say, first thing is that we have to listen and believe that something is going on. There are these damaging impacts so we can make a difference. And the next is to educate your community. You all have spent about, what, an hour or so here today listening to me talk about all these different impacts. And now you can go and have a conversation with your community. Hopefully, I have communicated and talked to and made this a way where we can talk about it with folks and really provide them with understanding of what's going on. And then support research efforts. There is a lot of ways you can do this. Of course, financial support is always welcome. There are a lot of grassroots organizations that are out on the ground doing the work, trying to do research to help mitigate ocean impacts, but also to communicate this research. So supporting their efforts through donations, through amplification, if you're on social media, retweeting and amplifying their compliments, sharing their posts. And then I would say the last thing, and this is my favorite, is to believe in change. I know for me, as someone who is looking at these impacts on a daily basis, it's hard to believe that we can even do anything, that change can come. But when I look at the youth, when I look at the advances in technology, like using environmental DNA, I believe that there can be a change. And so we need you, the community, large scale, to also believe that we can make a difference and that we can change, because ultimately we need each other to save this thing. Alrighty, I think that is all of my time. Thank you so much for listening. And I think we're going to have some questions now. And please feel free to contact me on any of the methods on the screen. Thanks, y'all.
So thank you, Dr. Moore. That was a wonderful presentation. But it's apparently so clear that I don't see any questions.
Oh no!
I'm not sure why. I'm checking my colleagues to see if there are any questions. But I think I'm interested in actually this question that I have is, to what extent do you collaborate from where you are in the US with people in other parts of the world, like, well, Suriname and Guyana, for example?
So I think that's a great question. So personally, in my research now, I haven't done any international partnerships. In the past, I have, but not right now. And I think I would love to talk about ways that we can build partnerships in the community, because we're saying like, oh, it's one ocean. So if I'm just doing stuff over here for this part and not talking to everyone else, then what am I really doing? So I think creating a network of scientists is what is the goal. I think for Black and Marine Science, we're definitely trying to do that by connecting all the Black and brown scientists, of course. But we also know that there are other scientists, there are marine scientists everywhere. And so I'm hoping that that we can all come together to support our efforts and share efforts, to be able to truly talk about the impacts to the ocean and what's going on in the ocean.
Yeah. So maybe to follow up on that question, in Suriname we don't really have that many marine scientists, and actually the TNC is not working in Suriname yet. So are there opportunities maybe for the TNC to start working with our local university, so that we can create this, enthusiasm for the ocean? Because I'm enthusiastic about it, and my team is, and we're trying to convey this. But I think we need more than just enthusiasm. We need to actually educate people, as you said, and do research.
Yeah, and I'm also money. Like, it comes down to it, and I think that's what I have really been. What I didn't realize maybe was so huge is to where the funding goes for marine science research, for marine science education, for marine science outreach, and it generally doesn't go to people that look like you and me. And so I think that's the first thing that we need to discuss, is that if we're really talking about the ocean, right? And who is impacted by the ocean and who could really help to save the ocean, then we really need to start funding those people, those areas, those communities. And so I think just having conversations more like these and saying, hey, we're giving all this money over here to the same people who aren't doing much. Not doing much. So, hey, when are we going to change that? And so I think building real partnerships is what is going to be key. And I want to clarify real partnerships. So something that I've noticed with Black and Marine Science is that people are, they just come up to us and like, oh, hey, here's a group of Black people. Can you just sign your name on this proposal? Like,
Yeah.
could I read it or no, And so I think there is a disconnect of saying, oh, well, there's a group, let's just add them to it, versus, hey, let's build them and make them a part of this community. Let's write this proposal together. Let's see what the needs are together, versus this saviorism mentality. And I think that's the reason why we're here where we are today. So yeah.
So there's actually a question. So wonderful. Miss Clarissa Vasseur is asking, is there any information on how much microplastics are in our oceans, and how can we tackle this?
Oh, yes. I don't have that information offhand, but I'm sure that, I probably could do a search, but there is a whole field of research now that has increased due to plastic production and plastics in the ocean. So there is a lot. I would say there's a lot of microplastics in the ocean, but it's also even hard to quantify what even a lot is, because again, we're talking about at the microscopic level. So once the plastic enters the ocean, it breaks down, and who knows how many times, how many levels, where it's moved, where it's flowed. So I think that's just another challenge that we have to try to understand the saving of the ocean, is to understand all the impacts to the ocean and how we even quantify it. And I think even more largely is that we know we've only explored about 5-6% of the ocean. So there's a whole lot more that we don't even know what's going on at all. So we need a lot more ocean researchers, ocean enthusiasts, people who care about figuring it out.
I switched off my microphone. So actually, also to add to your response, I know there's been a lot of recent papers that came out about this land-based sources of pollution and plastics. And as you said, the most important thing, actually, Mike said this at his. He said, look at how you consume. What are you consuming? And I think we as consumers need to start also telling our suppliers, the people we buy products from, that we don't want the plastic. I do something weird when I go to the store, and sometimes things are, like uh, wrapped in plastic, but it's not really necessary. I just remove the plastic and leave it in the shop because I don't want to take it home. The people are always like, "What's this woman doing?" But it's like a statement, like a mini statement.
It is, and you're right. And I think it's so hard because this is what I try to balance is human consumption in our own, like what we're doing, and also though big corporations. Because like me, my one person, like I'm getting a bottle and maybe I recycle it, maybe I don't. But we have this huge corporation that's putting out billions of bottles. So why is it on me to recycle my one bottle when actually that corporation should be regulated to say, no, stop making these bottles? So I think we really need to get on the large scale. And that's why I think about that. I ended with community action, is because as a community, at the community level, we have so much power in numbers where we can get together and create petitions and go talk to our politicians saying, hey, why are you making me recycle this? Just don't make it. How about that? Like, why are we trying to blame us when it's really these organizations that are making millions and billions of dollars off of this and they're harming the environment? So I think it's about, again, just getting the community on board saying, hey, actually, yeah, we can recycle, but you could stop.
Yeah, and I think because I'm also part of a waste platform, that has actually become clear that the recycling is not such a good option. And there's one booth, and I would tell everybody to visit it, Zero Waste Suriname, because actually we should stop creating waste, and we should actually really tell the producers that we don't want the plastic anymore because it's really so toxic. Actually, Canada just had this put into law that certain types of plastics are now considered a toxic substance, which means that there's a different way you handle than that plastic. So it's really, we have to work on all levels, also on the policy, I think, where we tell our policymakers that they have a part to play as well.
Exactly. I'm trying to find it, and maybe I'll find it later, but on one of our BIMS Bites videos, I think it was the marine debris episode, we have an episode talking about marine debris, but there's also a petition that we found where someone is trying to get this single-use plastics banned. And so that petition is up. They were trying to get some couple million signatures. So if I can find that, but it is linked on our YouTube video for the marine debris episode.
Okay, so I'm trying to see if there's more
questions. I see a question. It says, do you think there is a need to target young persons of Afro descent to encourage them to think about a job in the field of marine science? And what is the best way to do this? And I would say yes. So I would definitely say yes. I would say that, first of all, marine science has a bad rep. It doesn't really have the best PR because it's marketed as something for old white people, or it's like this white people thing, like, oh, it's super expensive. You have to have money to go into this field. And that's why I didn't even know it was an option until I actually was already in school. So I think that myth there needs to be just demystified, it needs to be dispelled, because I think there are things that did make marine science expensive in this whitewashed field, but it definitely has changed and we're trying to change it. And so again, going back to Black and Marine Science with our BIMS TV series, we also have a BIMS Bites Kids. So we have our regular videos that are for the general public, but then we also have 3-minute videos that are specifically for K through 5 to get them interested about different marine science topics. And so I think the first thing is maybe showing them our YouTube channel, but just showing them the different types of marine science jobs that there are. We talk about that on our YouTube channel, but then showing them that there are people who look like them in the field. And I think that was something that could be super discouraging. He's like, oh, I don't want to go and do this. Why? But there are folks who are here who are here to help. So I would say that. And so I would say, I guess the best way I could say, you know, getting them educated, trying to show them different opportunities, look at our YouTube channel, but then also experiences. So maybe like, you know, going to work at an aquarium or a scuba diving center or some other type of water related thing. And they don't have to always be volunteer internships. A lot of folks do have paid opportunities now because that's something else we've been trying to stop. Like, no, we're not doing these unpaid internships. No, that's work. So there's definitely a lot of different opportunities.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely think that makes sense. So I'm just going to go back a little bit to household because I don't think there's other questions. So would like to thank you, Tiara, Dr. Tiara Moore, for your presentation and for being at our event. I would say come and join the youth panel. Come and see what the youth is talking about, because I think you will like it. You will enjoy it. On the other hand, of course, we have the other session that is running concurrently with Dr. Maya Trout. So it's a little bit, oh, where am I going? So it's a bit of a challenge. But in the meantime, at this moment, well, actually in 4 minutes, we will have a break. And then we will, during the break, you will be in your booth. Am I right? Yes. So people can come, go to you and meet you, interact with you directly. Also, people visit other booths. It's really fun. The booths will remain open during the sessions, but also I would say don't miss the sessions, because the sessions are going to be really inspiring. I understand that we cannot be at 2 sessions at a time, so we will have the sessions later on our YouTube channel. So, but still, you know, I understand that, you know, both of the sessions are interesting. Michelle Belfour, who's a volunteer, she will moderate our youth panel session. She works. She's been working with us on and off. Amazing person. She works on not necessarily she used to work in this field, but after she came in contact with us, she started doing more in environmental work. And Dr. Maya Trost, as already said by Mike, is from Guyana, University of Florida. They will be introduced at their sessions a little bit more. But at this moment, that's it for now. We're going to then go over into our break. And we will see you in the booth, Dr. Moore. Thank you.
All righty. See y'all there. Thank you.